in this project I started in 2021. It was like we're a year into the pandemic, and I was feeling quite sad about what was going on in the world, but also very apathetic about my creative practice, and trying to find ways to be creative and to do something new. A portrait project of the scale is very unlikely for me, or was very unlikely for me, because my work is usually not focused on portraiture, but I do a lot of freelance work and, portraits for people, and I never thought of it as my creative practice, or like creative practice as an artistic practice. But I was looking for something meaningful in my life, as if, there was not enough meaningful things. But I guess I was looking for something that was bigger than me. And then opportunity of a grant came up, and I reached out to some folks in Anacostia and asked them if they would like to collaborate with me. I'm not a DC artist, and so Women Corcoran Committee grant is focusing on either DC artists or a community in DC that would benefit from the results. And we always joke with my friends, in Baltimore there is, a million artists and like 3 grants, and in DC there's like 3 artists and a million grants. That's an exaggeration, but I feel like there are not enough ways to support independent artists in Maryland. So I'm truly grateful that opportunity came up, and I'm just gonna go through slides and hope that they will work. Okay, here you go. I had 2 assistants. I teach at the university and in a design program, and I had a film and a moving image intern who worked on most of the footage, and I had a designer. And some of the things that we grab, I'll talk about this. So this is our like little promotional postcard that my assistant Jalen designed for us. And I know I will forget to mention it, so I put this slide kind of the forward of my presentation, is that the opening is actually conveniently on Saturday. The show opened last week, but the reception, if you're brave, if you're going to the Women's March, stop by On Floor Gallery on your way back, because I feel like the timing is working out. So this exhibition is now on view. I don't have any installation shots yet, but they are on my Instagram. Okay, so the project, as I proposed it fits into the category of social practice, where it's a creative practice that engages people and communities, and the outcome, the art, is actually engagement, not the final result. So wet plate is a process that's full of surprises, and I can't say that I have nailed the technique yet. I feel like I've been spoiled with digital photography. I have a background in film. That's how I learned photography, but I've been doing obviously digital for the past 20 years. And it's been kind of easy, right? So every time you engage with non-digital processes, you have to kind of go back to the basics. And wet plate is very capricious. So I had to recenter myself as being engaged and present with the sitters, and the project participant was at the heart of the project, rather than getting an image. But also I feel responsibility of producing a good photograph, because people give me the gift of their face and their gift of their presence, and I feel the responsibility to give back with a good photograph. So for most sitters, we took 2 images during the sitting. One image I kept, one actual plate I kept for the portrait, and for the project, and the other plate went home with the sitter. And in a second, I'll show you what that means. Okay. Actually, when I'm done with my presentation, I'll show you the actual plate that I have in my hand. Okay, so I'm sure you know a thing or two about DC area. So Anacostia is it started as a Native American settlement. It's a vibrant African-American community now. And people who came to sit for portraits, I'm gonna go to the next slide so I can just talk about it. People who came to sit for portraits are mostly were Anacostia residents, a lot of artists, people who work in Anacostia, people who have lived there but since moved away. And it's one of those areas in DC that hasn't gotten fully gentrified, and it's still affordable to own property and to buy houses. So a lot of people who want a vibrant community and who cannot afford paying DC price tag for a house buy property there now. So all kinds of people, walks of life, walked through the door. I wanted to mention a few things. This project started as a research. My assistants and I felt it was important to set the tone for the project and to introduce historic photographs of Native and Black Americans that were represented in early archives. Frederick Douglass, you see here, was the most photographed man of the 19th century. He commissioned, he was not himself a photographer, but he commissioned over 150 portraits and disseminated the likeness of himself to African-American community in the sense of empowerment. His portraiture fits in this realm of heroic portrait. He never smiled for the portraits. His very serious, stern look that kind of demonstrates self-possession and kind of self-ownership in a way. So my wonderful designer assistant designed a series of Instagram posts where she took a historic image and then she juxtaposed a text about who this person is. So most of these historic portraits started as daguerreotypes and wet plates. And this is our Instagram page where these portraits were produced in one of the sessions. I think it was a September session. So we came back every month. We took a setup, and wet plate requires quite an elaborate setup. It requires very powerful strobes. So back in the days, people used to sit for, I don't know, between 1 and 15, 30 seconds for a portrait. Nobody smiled because it's hard to hold a smile for that long. For consistency, I use very bright flashes, strobes, all together in power. Each strobe is about 1,300 watts. So altogether, I get close to 5,000 watts in power. And that compensates, it's strobes power fire at 1/1000th of a second. So it's instant, it's very quick. And we are able to, have these great portraits and, get feedback immediately. So wet plate, let me see if I can, okay, here are some portrait session photographs. So Anacostia Art Center has a black box theater, which they allowed me to turn into a darkroom. And because they have theater lights, we just turned on red and orange. So it was kind of like a natural darkroom environment there. And so it's all red light because wet plate collodion is not sensitive to red light. So everything that's actually red, like if you were wearing a red scarf, it would render as really, really dark. And here's some portraits. So we produced, and I have some text. Those quotes were gathered from people who sat for the portrait. So we produced 2 plates, as I mentioned. And for me, it was very important to share and get feedback from the sitters, to ask them how they feel about how they look. They would give me feedback. They'll take another photo. So it was a collaborative process where the participants were almost shaping their own identity and the way they look. This was I felt like as a photographer, as many photographers, I think you would agree with me, you have to be in control of the process because it's a very technical process that requires skill and positioning and lighting. But also, a lot of times subjects of photographs don't get to say how they look, right? I mean, if you're working for a client, I hope we ask them how they like the photos, but sometimes when fine art portraits are done, there's the conversation about representation is missing often from the process. So these two guys, they're community leaders. Okay, and I'm gonna go back to the previous slide. So I mentioned all sorts of people walk through the door. We actually had advertised it through Anacostia Art Center, but also we had an Instagram page and invited people to share. So the woman on the left who walked through the door, her name is Camille, and she was Michelle Obama's nutrition advisor. And then the woman on the right, Janaya, she is a 20-something veteran. She just retired from the army, and she really likes, she doesn't live in Anacostia, but she really likes to just go there and patronize Black businesses. So she was there. On the left is Jay Sun. He is incredible poet and writer and film director. And he grew up in Anacostia, still lives there. He runs a youth program. He's a music producer. Was just an incredible human being. And, you know, he was working a shift at one of the stores in the Anacostia Art Center. And I stopped by and we just started a conversation. And the more we talked, the more like the richness of his life just unraveled. And we took two portraits and they came out. This is one of my favorite portraits, just the way his gaze confronting the camera, confronting the viewers, and just the richness of the textures in this image, and just a very direct eye contact that he's making. On the right is artist. He's a poet and also local community leader. He runs a lot of musical events and poetry readings. And he came in wearing all Black. And for him, this portrait was symbolic because we had a very interesting conversation about the symbolism of what he was wearing. Because as a Black man, he reflected on how sometimes the nuances of what it means to be a human and a Black man are missed, especially considering everything that's happening politically lately. And he wanted to represent the values and the colors and the nuances of what he was wearing as a symbol. So that was really beautiful. On the left-hand side is an artist, John Holden. Also didn't grow up in Anacostia, but found a community there and since moved there and does a lot of radio events and art exhibits and community projects. And on the right is Lake Rose, who grew up, he wasn't born in Anacostia, but grew up there. And in an interview, they said that only in Anacostia, the richness of what it means to be, there was African immigrants and artists and all sorts of musicians. So Lake found a very rich and vibrant Black community in Anacostia. And Lake is a musician and a drag performer. And Tremaine came with her partner and they sat together, but I just loved how both of them looked. So I asked them to take a separate portrait. And Rashad was an artist whose paintings were on the view during the time we were doing these sessions. So we took Rashad's portrait. All right, and Ortiz on the left was one of my first sitters and had this incredible presence. She's an artist and yoga practitioner. And I feel like there's this timelessness in her face and beauty and something just like really serene. And on the right-hand side is Melody, who is a writer and a producer, and she lives in Bermuda and was just shopping in Anacostia. She came in with her husband. Her friend lives in Anacostia, so we took their portraits. And on the left-hand side is Millet. She's a fashion designer. traveled all over Africa and United States and came back to Anacostia and settled there. And John is he lives in Anacostia, a community leader, and then his kids were born one day, and he became a stay-home dad. He had a background in theater, so he started a participatory theater program called Callback Theater, and now he runs events, and it's really beautiful. He performs all over DC with his crew. Let's see what I have. So I can talk and talk and talk, but I guess one thing that I can mention in terms of what I learned from this project is I wasn't sure what exactly. I mean, I was practicing my craft and I was engaging with the community, but I feel like I only after I finished this project, I realized that what I will really remember is conversations with everybody there, conversations with these people. That's what this project almost came about for me. Yeah, so in the exhibit, which I hope you will all come and see, these portraits are really small, so I'm going to stop sharing screen just so I can show with you. Let's see what I have here.
And Elena?
Yeah.
This is me, Sandy. I know that we're going to have lots of questions, so let me know when you're going to be ready for questions.
Yeah, I just want to, I wanted to show you, like this is the actual plate. You can see it's 4x5 in size, and I shoot with a view camera, and I have these camera backs that are adapted for wet plate. So wet plate is actually a process that requires this highlights are actually silver nitrate. So the plate has to be sensitized right before you're taking the photo. Therefore, it's called wet plate because the plate needs to be wet before right before, you know, when you take the photo. So it's like a Polaroid of 19th century. It's very hands-on process. It takes about 15 minutes to make one plate. Okay, so I'm ready for questions, Sandy. Thank you.
Okay, so Diane, you've lined up some already in the chat room. So why don't you get us started? And then I want everybody to join in. And we've got plenty of time to have a conversation with Elena.
I'm just blown away. I really love how you seem to be intimately connected with each one of the sitters, as you called them, and you have the stories. I know one of the questions that I had was just like when you were with your researchers and they were showing the historic images and they had like bio sketches beside it. In your final work, I guess at the Corcoran or whatever final kind of body of work that you want to do, are you thinking of not only having quotes, but like a bio sketch beside each one as well, or just stories, snippets of the stories?
I had, yes, this was the idea. So this is when, like the next project I do, I will think it through.
The next grant, of course, yes.
But we had interviews, which was kind of like, how are we gonna do it? So my intern Jalen, she just took some notes, jotted them down, and then another woman who was assisting me, she decided to record them. So I felt like between those two means of collecting stories, one was too short and insignificant, and the other one was too long and overwhelming. And then it fell on me to kind of like transcribe everything. And I'm like, I need a person to do this with me. So to answer your question, and they're very inconsistent, right? So on our Instagram page, I have little blurbs about every person, and I don't know, I haven't posted everybody's pictures yet. But then I found that people started reaching out with me, and they started saying like, that's not what I said, you know, like, please correct it and make it that. So then I tried to like just sending everybody Google form and say, could you please just answer this question for me so I can have the captions? And like 9 people did it. So I just gave up. So to answer your question, the exhibit actually doesn't have any captions. It's just faces.
Hmm.
And I've debated how I was going to handle, but I'm thinking about that this project could be a book and there needs to be some writing there. So I have to keep thinking about navigating
Go
that.
in many different ways too. You could
Yeah.
have video clips. Well,
And
that's great. I'll let someone else ask a
yeah,
question.
let's let others, and then we'll come back to you, Diane, as always.
I primed the pump.
Okay, okay.
Yes, I have a question. How did you introduce yourself to your subjects?
That's a great question because I'm an outsider in that community, and I had to be when I was giving a pitch to Anacostia Art Center about the project I was gonna do. One of the conversations we had with people who run it is that the community is very weary of journalists and artists who just use the community and people who live there as a sensation, right? And then the community never sees any benefit of the project.
Mhm.
So I told everybody, and some people thought when we were advertising it, some people thought that they had to pay for it. And it didn't click with me right away that people are not coming because they think it's like a paid thing. So I had to really spell it out and make flyers. And then when people walk through the door, I had to explain why I was doing it. What are the sitters getting from it, right? So they're actually getting an artifact with them, right? And for me, it's a project that gives back and honors this community. And my creative ego is kind of taking a back seat here.
That's good. Thank you.
Kenny,
Yes, Elena, being a portrait photographer myself, maybe I missed something in the beginning, but why did you go with the wet plate versus just straight digital photography?
Well, I actually the answer is very simple. It's just digital photography is not special enough. So I did a similar in 2019. I co-curated an exhibition at Maryland Historical Society.
Mhm.
And that was the time when I was learning wet plates. So as a part of this exhibition, my co-curator and I put together organized several community sessions. We thought it would be cool for people to come in and take their portraits and just learn about the history. So so first of all, they're not the historic communities. There is a history of misrepresentation and insufficient representation of communities of color in historic archives.
Mhm.
So that was on my mind when I felt like bridging the history and the present times is important.
Mhm.
So, and of course, it's so much easier to take a digital photo, and to get to a good photo, you just have to take more, right, and choose the best one. So allowing people to witness this historic process
Mhm.
was magical.
Mhm. Yeah, because when I look at the photos, the photos looks like it's really dated, many years back, many years ago. And I was just wondering, how did the participants feel about maybe having an image taken of them that looked like something that was taken back when Frederick Douglass was in his era?
I think everybody felt that it was special, for
Mhm.
sure. Much more special. And people who came, they knew exactly why they were there. And that was really special too, because they wanted the slowness, right? And they wanted the engagement, and the small talk, and everything that comes together as we discuss you know, we only have like 1 or 2 pictures to take. And this is not the process that makes people prettier or younger. It actually ages quite a bit. So we had a conversation about what it means to be seen and what it means to be in a photograph. And if I had people who hated their photo, and so I didn't use it, we're like, that's great, thank you for, you know, spending time with me, and I respect that you don't love it, and so it's not going to be in a project.
Well, that's why I was asking that question, because like some people today may not like the wet plate kind of look
Yeah.
in today's era, and I was wondering, did you run into that problem? What you just answered, yes.
So I just want to add that the lighting has to be really specific, and there is a way to light older women, and then there is a way to light younger men, and those lighting scenarios are not going to be the same. So I really had to master my lighting skills for this, because it's just there, you know, it's just a matter of lighting angles and how much flood is coming out of the light. So that is a skill that I feel like was very challenging for me. And in retrospect, I looked at some portraits, I'm like, why didn't I do this other thing? And also I think they are not, I wish I was more creative too, you know. I wish I did silhouettes and profiles photos, but it's a nerve-wracking experience to have to prepare a plate, have a small talk, you know, make sure you follow all the steps right. And then we had a lot of just like mishaps happening, like something was in the air and all the plates were coming out very low contrast. So I'm like, okay, I thought I nailed this process, but now it's messing with me, you know?
Well, in talking, did y'all use a light meter to meter your subjects?
No, because so I can use some photo slang here, right? So you're familiar on a digital camera, your lowest ISO is 100. And maybe if you shoot with film, I think they just stopped manufacturing ISO 50. So this process, wet plate, is ISO 0.5. So you can imagine how much light it requires for an exposure. If you sit on a very bright light, that would be 1 second. So I usually, if I were to meter, I would put my light meter on ISO 3 because it doesn't go any lower. And I would meter for f22, but actually shoot at f5.6 because that's the widest aperture on my camera. So when you do all that math, it comes about 0.5 ISO. So I just shoot my strobes on maximum, and I know how much light is going to come out. So you just kind of wing the rest.
Well, thank you very much for your information.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So interesting. I want to ask a question, Elena. And I might have missed this, but are you going to, if you're thinking about a book as a, you know, another part of the project, are you thinking about talking with the subjects and how this impacted them, not just the day that you shot, but afterwards, having their their portrait done, and they show the portrait to people, and so I would just be curious to know what impact that had on their sense of self later.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that was in my form that I sent out, that 9 people answered out of 100 that we photographed. And it was everybody felt that it was very special, you know, and to learn the history, and something was magical happening. And what I found really interesting, I grew up in Soviet Union, so we didn't, you know, nobody believed in God. So there's like conversation about anything spiritual is not a part of my vocabulary. But what was interesting is that everybody, but it is a part of African heritage people's vocabulary. And everybody who walked through the door talked about spirituality and connection and, you know, how something magical was happening in the room and they felt like they were connecting with their ancestors, and that was really beautiful. So one thing is that I know that I will not be able to gather that from everybody. So if I'm trying to create a book that represents everybody's portraits, is that okay for me to have like a blurb from one person and not from the other? So I'm still trying to decide what's appropriate.
Well, I love what you said about how they were saying they're feeling connected with their ancestors, because I think when I look at some of those images, I think it was Kenny that was saying, oh, are they connecting with, the technology that was around with Frederick Douglass? And I'm thinking it's like, life is fleeting, and it's almost like you're looking at a piece of future history, right? Getting the representation back in. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Or maybe you can try a different way to survey them to get more thoughts, like
Yeah.
maybe do a survey monkey or something like that, or paper, like go back, or maybe have a party or something and invite everybody back. Maybe they'll come back for an in-person thing. They won't answer like a impersonal survey, but maybe like come back and have a video booth or something, and everybody kind of like talks about their experience. I mean, I can see a lot of grants lining up for you if there's like 5 artists and 1,000 grants, as you said, in DC. What are your thoughts on that?
For sure. Thank you, Diane. It's I know I definitely have to sit down and make personal connections again. I can't hope that I'm gonna send out this like impersonal survey and people will respond. So I started reaching out to people who I connected the most, and just having conversations. And I know it would be an ambition, very ambitious to try to do it with 100 people, but I know I can do it with 20 people, right? So I think I would, what I would need to do is reach out individually and say, hey, we had this moment together. Would you like to follow up? And I reached out to an artist who was the poet, one of the poets, and I asked him to write a poem for the book. Thinking that was before war in Ukraine happened, and I had all the energy to think about it. And I was hoping that was going to be in the show. So that kind of didn't materialize, but it's for the book. I think it's important to have. I almost think that it's more important to have some deep and substantial writing, and I don't know what that form is, rather than try to get 100 interviews with people, because some people in the project are women who are going through like temporary housing in a homeless shelter, so there's some vulnerable population that I don't even have their release form, so I know that's not going to be less possible, but also there are people who just gonna, I know they will never respond to me because they're busy, or maybe, or they haven't responded yet. So I'll see.
Elena, I think part of the problem you may run into, just looking at the African community. One of the things you say, well, I'm kind of an outsider. And so I know in African American communities, it's very difficult for African Americans to share a lot of their personal, intimate details with someone who's not part of their community. So that could be part of the problem itself. And just being an African American, I can tell you, if you're not part of the community, you're not going to get much. So that could be one of your hindering points right there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kenny. It's important to know. So
do you think, Kenny, do you think that it might be better to partner with the Anacostia art? You're saying that you took the photo in the art center and have them release a book, and then they can bring people in, like have someone, or you could have them interview each other.
Okay, let me give you a good example. On YouTube, there was a guy who wanted to know a lot about the street corners in Baltimore. So this was a white guy, right? So what he had to do is to go to someone who was in the community to give him
Yes.
accreditation, to
Mhm.
walk through the community with him. And then this guy asked the questions the white reporter wanted to know. He was a photographer and he was able to film everything he wanted. But sometimes you have to go inside the community to get the person that can give you credibility to even ask those questions. Okay. And then in
Yeah.
some cases, you may have to have someone other than her ask those questions.
Oh,
Who-
absolutely.
somebody,
Yeah.
somebody who looks like them.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so my assistants were Black, and I found that the trust that I felt like if I can just do the technical part and would you try to have a conversation, but people did connect with Jalen much more
Mhm.
in some instances, like I feel like it's absolutely like you go to any community,
Right.
and we are tribal creatures. We connect with our own so much more.
Okay.
And I didn't assume that they would connect with me, and I came to this project very, very humble.
Well, and let me just say this to you. I do world missionary work. I've been, matter of fact, I've been to Ukraine also. And anytime I go into a foreign country, it is pertinent for us to have boots on the ground from the person who lives there in that community to work with us. It's no way in the world as a missionary coming from United States, I'm going to be able to talk to somebody from Africa, Bulgaria, it doesn't matter. I need to have credibility on the ground. I need someone who speaks their language, know their community, to be able to do the things we need to do. It's no different as a photographer. When you want to try to do a particular project in someone else's community, you're gonna have credibility there, or someone to help you get credibility. So
Thank you. It was important for me to hear. Thank you, Kenny.
Yeah. And
Are
Kay?
Quick question. Do you think
Are
any
you
of the,
inviting all of your subjects to your reception?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that'll be fun when they all come, or those that want to come, and then they see each other there. That should be also a nice opening for you.
yeah, I
Thank
was gonna say the same thing. Do you really, do you expect many to come?
Mhm.
I think 20 people will come. I don't know if all of them will come.
Not 9,
No, like
20.
you say, 'cause, certainly people have a lot going on, and I'm not sure, I don't know the geography of Washington DC, the distance between Anacostia and where the gallery is, but some people just may not have the means to get there.
So the gallery is in Anacostia. It was important for me to show the work. So originally
That's
the
great.
exhibition was going to be at the art center, where we took the photos, but then in the middle of everything, in January, the art center ends up being sold. and you're like, okay, this is really about gentrification, isn't it? So we didn't know what was going to happen with the art center, but it remains. We didn't know that in January, but we had to plan the exhibit. So On Floor Gallery is like 2 doors down from Anacostia Art Center. So that's where the exhibit, it was absolutely crucial that the exhibition going to be in Anacostia.
No, that's great.
Mhm.
Really to hear that.
Thank you.
Ola, I saw you take the mute off there.
Yeah.
Very observant. So I'm not familiar with colloidal plates. You said that you kept one and you gave one to the participants. What can they do with a plate?
They can have it on their shelf. It's an artifact.
Okay.
So it's it looks like this.
But
It has their picture on it, so they can frame it, they can
I see.
throw it away. I mean, I don't know.
So it doesn't have to be developed further. It just is.
No. Yeah, it's like a Polaroid, so it's done. And then I also scan them, so they have scans of both plates.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Scott? You have a question? Oh, okay.
I don't.
Oh, okay. You just showed your video, so I thought maybe.
Oh, sorry. I kind of do
No,
have
no.
one though.
Ah,
I think that I think it's a really novel idea, and it's probably been said before too, that you're connecting them with the past, and also you're connecting them with the future, because these plates that you're making are unusual, and even if they were to get lost and just wind up somewhere else, somebody else might keep them just because they're so unusual. So you kind of make them live forever, really.
yeah.
And to compare a plate that you made of somebody in this year to Frederick Douglass, who lived quite a long time ago, and those plates aren't going anywhere, and they don't deteriorate. They'll live for many hundreds of years. It's very interesting. I like it. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Elena, a quick question, just based on something that Scott just said. He said you wanted to connect people to their past as well as the future. Do you think for the African American community that may be somewhat of a, what should I say, a past that they don't want to experience? I mean, you think about it. I mean, you're talking about Frederick Douglass. You're talking about a period of slavery. A whole lot of stuff that was going on back in that era. And so maybe I was just thinking about what Scott just said. I mean, would I want to take my past back to an era that may have been painful for someone who was African American?
That's very interesting, Kenny. Nobody said that to me from people who came for a portrait.
Mm-hmm.
But also there is this school of belief that in studio photography, some people believe that documentary photography is the authentic photography, right? It's the truth of the truths. And then there's historic, accounts how documentary, like it's impossible to not be biased. When you're framing something, you're excluding something else.
Right.
So there is a school of belief that says documentary photography is quite subjective. So there's other school of belief that believes that the studio photography is the most authentic, because if you remove the background, and Dawood Bey, Dawood Bey photographer, he talks a lot about it.
Yeah.
When he was doing a lot of his early work, when he was just walking the streets and photographing his community, got interrogated for, you're just perpetuating the stereotypes. So that's when he was focusing on studio portraits, because there is a belief that people just come as they are into the studio, and it's just you're just connecting with the face, you're not connecting with the background, and it's up to the person to shape their own representation by the way they do their hair or the way they dress.
Right.
So I had that in mind when I did these studio portraits. And what's also interesting, and I will never know, right? It's interesting that you're saying that, because it's not untrue. I mean, it's for some people, it's exactly that. And
I can tell you, in many Black communities, the pain of the past is still there.
Absolutely.
And when you see things happening like George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, it's just really bringing to the forefront pain that's already there. So,
and that was also on my mind when I am a white artist, coming in with a project that celebrated the Black community. That was important to me as a human being to do that. And maybe it doesn't come across as such, and I don't know how I think we have to ask these questions, and it's absolutely important that we ask about ethics. What are white artists doing in the Black community? Is it is what you're doing ethical? Does it bring is it healing for a community where you're working? And that's what the organizers at the art centers said to me, that we don't want just like some artists coming in and taking pictures or like making paintings and they're just like disappearing and this community is like, oh, I forgot about the most important thing, which is us, right?
right.
It served some purpose, and then people ended up not to be at the center of it. So
Right.
It would
Oh.
be interesting to hear what people thought. Like what are the different ideas? Because I mean, I obviously I see not obviously, but I see the connection that very clearly. But I don't know what people think of it. I think some people might think possibly, right, could think this is wonderful, and other people could think this is horrible because it's just right. It's bringing back
But you
a
know,
image
yeah.
of the past because I would believe Anacostia was probably full of people that migrated from the South free and maybe had the first image taken of them up there. But is that a good thing or not to compare yourself to somebody from 1910 or 1865 or whatever? I'm not sure.
Well, I can answer that question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember Maryland PPA, when the Black History Museum was open,
Mm-hmm.
we took a trip there, and I was there pretty much all day, and I was photographing a lot of the artifacts that was there. I can tell you that there was a lot of Black African Americans that was angry when they saw some things in the past being connected, showing now. And there was a lot of anger there, and there was a lot of emotions. So I think that it's good to know the past, but you have to also realize that when you show it, you're going to bring up some emotions that is going to set some people off. I mean, even as a photographer, I'm there trying to photograph some of this archive that I've never seen before. I had feelings about it, you know. So I think, you know, like I said, I think you have to really be very skillful when you're doing a project like that, to, you know, I don't know, have some credibility with your community, because you could, like I said, when you're connecting, you know, new with old, it can bring up some feelings there. And I'm saying, and I can't tell you the number of people I've seen at the Black Museum wiping tears away from their eyes and was angry.
Although, isn't that the purpose of art, to evoke emotion? But anyway, so good or bad, but good or
Well,
bad or whatever it is, I think what's really cool about giving the sitter, as you said,
mhm.
a physical photo, unlike digital, it's a physical photo. It can't be easily photoshopped. You know what I mean? It's real. It's like a real piece of history, like what you said, artifact, I think is what you use. So I think it's great. I mean, it could almost be righting a wrong. I think, as you were saying, right, that history has been didn't show enough of you know, non-white people throughout the years in photos. So let's get some more real photos of real people, non-photoshopped. I think it's great.
I saw a lot of dignity in your portraits of the people sort of feeling good about themselves as you took the picture. And to me, that's a very important thing that you want to, that you could be happy to put across, glad to put across in your work.
It comes through.
I did a lot of my photojournalism in Africa, and I lived there for 18 years. And I just never experienced the sort of thing that Kenny is talking about, because we had many African friends, and those that have come here to the States several generations ago, they could have a sense of pride, Kenny, not just anger. You don't agree with me?
No.
I mean, the
Actually,
museum is going
ac-
way back, right?
Yes.
Actually, Kay, I just came out of Africa back in March, and there's still some resentment there. So I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
I guess it depends.
We appreciate that, Kenny.
I guess it depends on who you're sitting with. See,
Oh, yeah.
you know, if I'm sitting with a missionary who grew up there, lived there, and then I'm coming in. I can probably get more out of that conversation than you could. And I would get them to be able to share more detailed and emotional things than you could.
Yes. I'm
Because
sure
we
that's
because we do have a connection there.
Mhm.
And so some things you're not going to get that I'm able to get. Now I can go to Europe and I'll probably get less information about them than you could. And it works just the opposite. So it's just the same. But when you're talking about, you know, and here again, I did a photo conference for an organization 4 weeks ago. They are a pro-black organization, and I can tell you right now, it was a 3-day shoot. And in their conference, there is still a lot of bitterness about how blacks are being treated here in the United States. And they're a very hostile group. And I didn't even know that the group I was photographing for, this group existed. But 3 days of listening to some things that they were going through, trying to start up businesses for black businesses and the problems that they're going through, still a lot of anger there. So like I'm saying, there's some things you would be privy to and some things you may not be because of race, you know.
And yet,
There's still a lot of skepticism there.
and
Paula?
and yet photography captures a moment. So
Mhm.
photographs of all those people are photographs of them at that moment.
Yes.
Mhm.
Whatever those photographs elicit in them is beyond your control. They may have feelings, but
Yeah.
themselves don't have those feelings.
So
You're absolutely right, Ola. I just want to say that it's I second guess myself a lot, and it really hinders my creative process. And I can easily talk myself out, out of doing this project, Kenny, considering some of the themes you brought up.
no, I don't want you to
And
talk yourself out of it.
No, I'm just saying, I'm just
You're aware
sharing
of it.
how, but Ola, you're right. It's you never know how your creative work will come across because it means something to you and may mean something offensive or completely different to others. And it's good to ask these questions, but
Mhm.
then you have to do the work.
Yes, you just have to be aware of it, and then if you want to work to elevate itself, this is what I'm just saying to you. You may want to have an assistant that can help you with the groundwork. You see?
Exactly. And that's why it was important for me to
Right.
hire
Right.
Black assistants.
But that was one of the things I was saying, and I agree that the shot is a one moment in time. I mean, I can tell you right now, photographing in Africa, there's a young lady that you'll see down the road in one of my presentations. I see her clear as day, but I can still see the emotions of her talking to me about her mother dying from AIDS a week ago. And you can see the pain and the tears that she's holding back. That's a real moment right there. And so to see that moment, then to be able to ask the question, what happened? And to be able to have her share with us that's the second part of that I was able to get. And I'm just saying that sometimes, depending on who you are, you may be able to get that second piece to the question, to be able to ask those questions. Some people, if you're not part of the culture, they'll shut down on you. That's all I'm saying.
It's true, yeah.
Can I just I think Elena, you put a link in there. It looks like it's a 7-minute video. Is
Yeah.
that something? Sandy, do we have time to watch that?
You should just maybe click on it and watch it separately because it is
Yeah.
7 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's past 9. We can watch it separately.
Okay.
And yeah, I sort of just want to wrap it up, Elena, and just thank you for just an illuminating, enlightening, engaging evening. I learned a lot. I have all these ideas of what what I'd like to be doing in terms of working in a community with photography. So I thank you so much. It's been delightful. Yes, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
And
everything.
don't feel discouraged. Don't for any minute feel discouraged. You're simpatico with your subjects. That will take you everywhere you want to go. I think that's what I believe.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Beautiful work.
Mhm.
Yes, beautiful work.
So Elena, I'm not telling you don't stop.
Okay.
I'm just giving you some more quivers in your
I appreciate it.
in your arrow shaft to get the work done more efficiently.
Mhm.
Alina, you did a good job. You evoked an emotional response in Kenny.
Look, I'm just keeping it real. I mean, I've been through
You
this.
are.
Hey, look,
Oh.
I can't talk to someone about the Holocaust, can I? Yeah, I could not understand what they went through completely. You know, different culture, different race of people. It's the same thing with African Americans. You know, when you have family members, you know, that we don't even know our true ancestor, that's still painful for people. You know, most people can say, well, you know, my father lived here in the United States. His grandfather came from Italy, and his grandfather came from XYZ country. They can give you a whole lineage. As a Black person, where did your parents come from? We can tell you it stopped at the plantation. That's it. Now, you think that sits well with Black people? No. That we don't have that lineage. It's almost like a person who's been adopted trying to find out who their birth parents were. Right. That's painful. So a lot of people don't understand that. And, you know, I go to a multicultural church, and my pastor all the time talks about his lineage. And I had to tell him, I can't go there with you. I don't know where my lineage is. And so that's a painful thought for me, you know, to say, I can't pinpoint where my generation came from. So, and a lot of people don't think like that. That's not us. So that's why there's still pain there. And I'm just saying that's how the community is. And so when you are someone coming in from the outside asking questions, yeah, sometimes you could get a lot of skepticism, like, why are you asking these questions? What is this for? Why should we answer this question? And they're going to be a lot guarded for you. So you have to get someone else for a legitimate project to help you get through those barriers. And they have to trust you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kenny, I really appreciate your honesty and your willingness to share your feelings and your experience, because it's very hard to express.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important that we all express who we are and what we go through. That's the only way we can appreciate one another. You have to understand. You have to understand where I'm coming from. I have to understand where you're coming from, so we can come to a mutual understanding of trying to understand people. You know, when George Floyd, we had this whole uprising with the riots and stuff. I can't, and like I said, I go to a multicultural church, 27 different nationalities in it, and a lot of people in my church was like, I'm not understanding where the rage is. Can you help me understand this? We had to actually set up groups where people had to help explain to other people why there was so much anger in the streets. They had no clue. Just telling you. It was a 6-month group trying to explain to other people why the African American community was up and roaring. Yeah. So not to be a downer or anything like that. I'm just
No, it's your truth. You're allowed to speak your truth.
Yeah. So like I said, even as a photographer, you know, like I get all kinds of people come in my studio. It's up to me to sit down and get to know them. I have to build a rapport with them, and especially if I want to do work with them down, you know, in the future, we have to have an understanding with each other. I have to know where my boundaries are, and we had to try to connect some kind of way, So just saying.
Well, I just also want to say that what's interesting is that just because we don't see those examples of early photography, diverse examples, doesn't mean that they don't exist. Maybe they don't exist on such scales, but photographers owned by Native Americans and by Black Americans, those photographic studios existed widely in 19th century. And they're still not represented in history photography books that were written mostly by, white researchers. So I know that archive has yet to resurface, and Deborah Willis is one of the people. She's probably doing everything solo. I don't know if you have seen her books, but she's been an instrumental, and that's been what, just 25 years of her research of a century of what's going on in photography, so just wanted to leave it on the up note, is that there's this great film, and I'm sure you've seen it, but I'd like to show it to my students. It's called Through the Lens Darkly, and it's on Canopy. I'm sure it's on Amazon somewhere. Oh, it's on YouTube in full length, but it features a lot of the early African American photography